Thank you for your patience. It is 6:33. I'm calling to order the regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission. Today is Monday, April 18th, 2022. And we can get started with the regular meeting. Just a couple of announcements. April 30th, the city will be celebrating Arbor Day, 9 a.m. at George H.P. Smith Park. And that's all I'm going to say for now, because Marty will probably be reporting on that. On May 1st, the British Car Show is taking place down at the ferry terminal, and there's a parade. The Winner's Circle Parade will come up to 2nd Street, and it starts at 3 o'clock. Our next PRC meeting will be held May 16th. May 14th is the city election for mayor, and Harry Kaiser is excused tonight. And that's all the announcements that I have. Are there any from the table? Nope. Okay, so that will take us to our first order of business, B1, which is the approval of the Parks and Rec meeting minutes from March 21st, 2022. You've all had an opportunity to review the minutes. Any comments, corrections?
I have one minor correction. So this is Candace for the record. In the discussion about the pavilion, at that time, the mayor had not yet appointed any liaisons to the library for the purposes of the discussion for the pavilion. We hope that that will occur soon, but
Okay.
it didn't quite happen yet.
Right, okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, is there a motion?
I move to accept the minutes.
Thank you. Second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That will take us to item C, the commissioners' reports. And I'll go in reverse this month. So Warren, can you start us off with your reports on 1812 and Mary Vessels?
Not too much to report, except the tulips have mostly 90% bloom in those parts at any rate. There's still some to bloom on the slope at 1812 Park. And we're awaiting the tulip dig on April 29th, and then hopefully the weather will turn so we can plant annuals soon after.
Great. Yeah, the parks and city properties looked beautiful.
And I am trying to still find a larger magnolia tree for 1812 Park, but I'm not having any success.
Okay, all right. We can maybe look at another species again if we're not getting the right caliper size tree.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Ed?
Very little activity in the park right now. We've had, Harry and I have been meeting with, African American Heritage Commission, arranging for Juneteenth, working on the logistics of that. And I'll have a full report for everyone at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
That's about it. Yep.
Thank you. Ray, can you report on Swanndale Park for
Sure.
us?
Over the course of the last month, there was Lewis and Bloom had 2 work days there, which were great. One was on March 30th in anticipation of the Tulip Festival. And then there was one last week just to make sure the park was looking good, and the park really is looking good, clean and very neat. So happy about that. Ongoing are the waiting for the contractor estimate to come back for the 2 holly trees next to the shed. Waiting for Envirotech to come back to look at the fountain to see if we can do something to prevent the leaking of the fountain before we fill it for the season. And then ordering and getting the lamppost in at the end by the herb garden. And then again, when the sewer line's going in, so we could just plan around that, not that we need to know exactly when, but if we can plan around that, when that work is being done. So
Okay.
that's it.
And I think I will circle back with the contractor for the Hollies. I talked to them last week and they didn't get back to me. So I will circle back with them this week on that because they are doing another project for us as well. So we'll get that started. Would you like to give an update on the community garden as well?
Yes, so the Lewis Community Garden, again, starting its fourth season. The first meeting of the year was held on Saturday, the 16th. We completed the water line project that was in there. So the water lines are back in after the expansion of the fence was completed. And then also the final critter proofing of the fence, we hope, was completed on that day as well. There was education on the companion planting and also bug identification because it's an organic garden. So we had 2 bug doctors there explaining to us what bugs are good and what bugs are not good in the garden. So, you know, and then we again reiterated the commitment, even though we don't have community plots this year, we reiterated the commitment to donate harvest to the CRC. And each gardener is committed to doing that for this year.
Great. Okay, thank you. Rodney, would you like to report on Canalfront Park?
Yes,
It was
I
a
would.
Busy weekend there.
Pardon me?
It was a busy weekend.
It
there.
was, but before I do, I just wanted to commend Warren and Lewis and Bloom for how fantastic the tulips are in this town. You cannot drive into this town and not realize how committed some group of people are, everybody, I guess, and how important it is to have a beautiful city, beautiful town that we live in. And it makes all the difference to see that. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Roger. I have lots of help.
Yes, yes, I'm sure. And then I wanted to just say that briefly at Canalfront Park, they estimated they had over 1,000 people at this egg hunt on Saturday. And it wasn't a brief, everybody runs in, grabs their eggs and leave. They thought about it strategically and put the eggs in places where they could be supervised. So you didn't have toddlers standing crying with no eggs. And there were plenty of other things for them to do. So they've really learned from the past and each year it's getting better. And so they were very, very pleased with the success that they had. The other thing is that the other issue that came up before the Friends group was putting the concrete pad in for the temporary sculpture that will be placed there. It is going to be on a concrete pad, I understand. And the pad will be removed when the sculpture is taken away at the end of the period or the season. And then the Friends group is going to spend some money and take the area in the center of the lawn, which is between really the park and overfalls, which was always meant to be a drainage feature that collected the water and filtered it before it was then allowed to flow underground into the canal. The soil conditions there are so horrible. I went and took soil samples and sent them off to the Soil Conservation Service at the university. And they, what is this stuff? Well, it was, it's old or chewed up asphalt and it's full of all kinds of things. And the soil depth isn't very good. So they're going to, but it does pass water. So what they're going to do is take out the spongy soil that's there that was put in as a filtration. And they're going to put some fabric down and then put a very small crushed stone, probably a 57 stone over the whole thing. So it becomes a big oval of crushed stone that you can walk on, you could walk across, you won't sink in. And in the future, and that's where the Unbounded was placed last year. The year before that didn't happen. The tower was supposed to go there. And with any kind of a temporary sculpture placement, you always are concerned about the treatment of the soil around it or the land or the ground. If it's turf, it's going to get trampled. And so this way, people will be able to walk up to something if it's there and enjoy it and touch it if the artist wants them to without doing very much harm. So I think it's something we've talked about for a number of years, and I've recommended it into the budget a few times, but the Friends Group has, I believe, as far as I'm aware, stepped up to the plate and said, we'll pay for it. So that's where we
Okay.
are.
And that was the estimate that we got from Patrick,
It was
Right.
$5,000.
yeah, yeah, so I have that, so then
Okay.
if we're ready to move forward, and I'll verify with the Friends that they're gonna
Good.
do that. Okay, thank you. Marty, our tree program.
Okay, we have a couple of specific tree planting projects this year. First, we did receive a grant from the Delaware Urban and Community Forestry Service to plant 10 trees in GHP Smith Park in September of this year. This is going to be a grove, the mayor asked for it, a grove to honor prior council members, and some of them will get plaques right away for recently prior council members, and be more left over for the future. They'll all be native trees. They'll be planted near the intersection of Johnson Avenue and Park Avenue. Leaving room for entries and exits of vehicles and things when we have events and so forth. But that'll make, over the years, that'll make a nice shaded grove of trees right there. It'll be nice to walk under, and there'll be plenty of room, total open space for events left over. That's going to happen in September of this year. On Arbor Day, well, or April 30th, as Janet mentioned, we're going to have a tree planting in George H.P. Smith Park, but the other side of the park, the side right near BB Hospital. That one's going to involve planting 25 trees. They'll be planted by a teen group associated with the library, Lewis Library. It's called Roots and Shoots. And they were inspired by a global initiative called Trees for Jane Goodall. And their call to action is to protect and restore 1 trillion trees by 2030. So this will be a little help in that direction. The trees we're planting, the 25 trees we're planting for Arbor Day, like I said, they're being planted by a teen group, which is everything from grade 6 on up to high school. So some of the big ball trees we plant for our grant projects, I think would be hard for that group to handle. So we have trees in 1-gallon pots and 3-gallon pots. It'll be easier to handle and carry around. And they're going to get the urban forester from Dover is going to come down and give some instruction on how to handle the roots and plant the trees correctly and maintain them afterwards. So that should be very interesting. They're all native trees, American holly, black willow, eastern cottonwood, bald cypress, willow oak. In another development, we've, I forget how much we talked about last time about Great Marsh Park. Did we talk about our walkthrough? I forget.
No, because I think it was after.
It was after that. Okay, so yeah.
Our walkthrough was after
Shortly
our
after the
March
last meeting.
yes.
Yeah, okay, so I'll
Yep.
talk about that because Barry's not here, right? Is Barry online?
No, he's not.
No, I don't see
Okay.
him online.
But
So-
Eric is.
But
Eric's
Eric is here.
Eric is. So Barry has talked about having a plan and getting a contractor to create a plan for Great Marsh Park. Several weeks ago, Barry, Rodney, Janet, and I went with Eric Wall to do a walkthrough of a fair amount of the park, although it's a big park, we didn't get to all of it. And one of the things we did is look at the kinds of trees we have. And I am not going to tag and inventory every single tree. There are thousands of them, but I did tag and inventory about 20 specimens. We have some really nice, big, lovely pines, some lovely big Osage orange, and some other, a lot of nice native trees and some non-native trees too. But those now appear on our inventory online, Arborscope. You can find it online in our tree program. And I'll be inventorying a few more as we go along. just to give an example of the kinds of trees we have there. And I continue to do regular tree tag maintenance, inspections, and late pruning. That's it.
Thank you. It's a lot. Christine?
We don't have any, I don't have anything to report for Stango Park.
I'll pass until a presentation.
Okay, all right. Okay, you report on the beaches?
Thank you. Well, this weekend was certainly beautiful and the beaches were well attended. I have started working on a number of things to try and bring together volunteers and organize them a bit. As Christine suggested, I have joined the Surf Rider Foundation, and so we'll see what projects they're working on in the area. Candace connected me with Emily Ellinger from the library, and so we met for a couple of hours to talk about what her group of young volunteers would like to do to make a difference. And we're working out a schedule of when they would clean the beach. I also spoke to Eddie Mead at DENREC, who is in charge of Adopt a Beach, to make sure that Adopt a Beach volunteers are in place for all of the Lewis Beach sections, and they are. I did get from him too one of the data collection sheets that I can use for our volunteers to keep track of what kinds of trash they find, just so that we can keep an eye on that for ourselves, and also have the volunteers photograph themselves doing this so that we know what's happening when. I did talk to Emily about possibly having her group clean Savannah Beach and Johnny Walker Beach on Tuesday, July 5th, which we thought was sort of going to be a really important day to get out there and clean everything up after what will hopefully be another successful fireworks show. Let's see, I met with Janet to talk about how to proceed with the budget, since this is my first year with having a budget, and then seeing where we go from here. I will say this weekend, whenever I looked, all the benches were being used. People do enjoy having them there. That's a great amenity. It's a very valuable thing to have. People who just get out of their cars and want to sit on a bench. It's terrific. I am still looking for a photo of Mr. Johnny Walker. That is a very elusive thing. I have been on the phones trying to track that down, and I'm still working on that to work on a sign for him. I also want to connect with Tony Pratt. I went to the formational meeting of the city hiring Mr. Pratt to work on various erosion issues, especially, I know the main one is near, like north of the guarded beaches, but at the beach house is where there's been quite a bit of serious erosion. I know he was going to be working on that issue, but I want to connect with him and talk about just in general what we can be doing to help with that. And that is my report.
Okay, thank you. We have Judy is on Zoom. There she is. Judy, you have anything to report for recreation?
Just I had just a brief conversation with several of the Rotarians that are interested in doing the Boundless Can-Do Playground, and we're waiting to hear when the public meetings are going to be held about Great Marsh Park as a possibility for a location for this.
Okay. Yeah, that, I think we're looking at sometime late May, early June for that first hearing, but we'll get that information out.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank
That's all.
you. So that is the end of the commissioners' reports. Are there any other comments? Nope. Okay. You're up. That takes us to new business, presentation and possible action on a report to the Planning Commission regarding S122, the Roosevelt Landing Major Subdivision. And Eric, before you give your presentation, I just wanted to invite Janelle up to just give us lay the groundwork for us and what the commission is charged with this evening?
So good evening, I'm Janelle Cornwell. I'm city planner with the city. So this is an application for a major subdivision. I know a lot of people know that we've been updating the subdivision code. It has not been approved yet, so it's still going through the process. So this is going through the current code. So just that's why a couple of the numbers look the way they are. So the property is zoned R2, a residential low density in open space. So a part of the land is across Pilot Town Road. So that is zoned open space. So as with all major subdivision applications, they come before the Parks and Rec Commission to review the application on the effect of existing and proposed open space, the adjacent park areas and other natural features within the city. So this major subdivision will comprise of 8 single-family lots along with 2 open space lots. Lots 1, 3, and 8 will be located off the proposed road, Dairy Lane. Lot 2 will be located off of Pilot Town. Lots 1, 2, and 3 are also proposed to have land across Pilot Town. So it's called the land hook. So for the road, they are providing street trees along the proposed Dairy Lane. They have not identified the type of species, but they are proposing street trees. The project does require 10% open space. They are providing 11.5% open space, so it exceeds the requirement for open space. The 2 open space areas are the one at the end of the proposed cul-de-sac of Dairy Lane. They are proposing trees to be planted and other vegetation to be planted. Again, this specific type has not been identified, but they are proposing plantings in that area. And then the second open space is proposed to be along Pilot Town, along the canal. They are not proposing any landscaping as of this time in that area, just to kind of leave it grass. They are proposing sidewalks along both sides, and you're going to notice that some of the lots are a little bit smaller. That is, they're their first application that's taking advantage of our lot averaging. So that's something that's permitted for the code. Is if you have, even if it's a standard subdivision, you can go down to 7,500 square feet as long as the other lots exceed the 10,000 square feet. So if there was any concerns about that, it is perfectly fine that some of the lots are a little bit smaller because other ones exceed the code requirements. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I know Eric, who's here on behalf of the applicant, wants to go over a little bit more information.
Okay. Are there any specific questions for Janelle at this time?
The city maintain this existing dock.
So that if it's an existing dock, it's going to be part of the homeowners association or private land.
Okay.
It's not currently ours, and it's currently maintained by the city. So it's privately maintained.
And then the open space would be HOA as well?
Correct. All open space is HOA.
Okay. Thanks, Janelle. If there's any others, we'll
Be here.
Okay. Eric?
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. Little bit background. For those of you who may not know me, I think most of you do. My name is Eric Wall. I'm a registered landscape architect in Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. I'm with Pannoni Associates. And I'm representing the client here, Campbell Lewis, who's behind me, from RJL Associates, who's the owner of the property and developer. So a little background on this property. If you want to go to the next slide, please. This is an aerial photograph of the existing conditions that there is now. This is the old dairy. You can see there within the gold yellow parcel area is the dairy structure and the associated paving that goes with it. There really is no existing landscaping on the site per se. It's mostly right on the outer edge and on the adjacent properties. And I'll get into that a little bit later. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. This property was recently rezoned. It originally was industrial. There you see the site now is yellow, which it was rezoned to R2 in June of last year. And there's the letter of approval to change the zone on the left part of the slide. This is consistent with the R2 zoning along Pilot Town Road, as you can see going down. The bluish and dark greenish blue areas behind and to the side of the parcel are community facilities. The one is the cemetery and the larger area is the University of Delaware property. We are next slide, please. So this is part of the submission. The preliminary submission was existing conditions. And I wanted to highlight here the total impervious area that's existing on the site. And it's roughly over 55,000 square feet, over an acre of impervious area. And that includes the building and the paving. So when you see the proposed conditions, which is, can we go to the next slide, please? This is the proposed conditions of the development that we are asking for. And this impervious area is considerably less. And even when there are homes and driveways on the property, it will still be less than what the impervious area was before. And because of that, the stormwater facilities that we need only take into account the quantity, not the quality. So we don't need to have like a big stormwater basin to do the quality part. So one little clarification too, in the beginning on the agenda report, it talks about the access to the Pilottown Road. Lots 1 and 2 driveways will go into the interior drive, Dairy Lane, and the only parcel that will have access to Pilottown Road is lot 3, which is the upper left there on the corner. And that was also recommended by DelDOT as well. So this does consist of 8 lots, and we are taking advantage of the lot averaging and a little bit of the reason why. We wanted to have the lots on Pilottown Road face the canal and be consistent with the other lots along Pilottown Road. And to do that, we needed, and to have a right of way to come into the site, we needed to narrow the lots, and lot averaging allowed us to do a more minimal lot width. And therefore lots 1, 2, and 3 can face Pilottown Road. The houses will also face Pilottown Road, but the driveways for the 2 will connect to the interior drive. They also have the land hook or the parcels across the street, which are a little bit darker green in the image. And then the lighter green is the central open space that will be available to the community. So the open space, as Janelle said, consists of 11.5% of the site, which is more than the 10% required. And it is located in the rear towards the cul-de-sac, but I call that the rear of the property. And then you'll see some colored trees there, pinkish and dark green. We have not done a formal landscape plan because this is in the preliminary stage, but a landscape plan will be provided later on with specific tree species. It is my intent here to show the pink flowering trees as an understory type tree like redbuds or serviceberry. And then the darker green trees would be evergreen in nature. And you'll see a longer strip of solid green around the perimeter on the outside. Those are the evergreen trees on the University of Delaware property that are existing. And I also thought any kind of flowering tree or flowering shrub would be a nice accent against that evergreen backdrop. The open space is connected to the cul-de-sac and accessible to the sidewalk. And then you can take the sidewalk all the way down to Pilottown Road and across the street to the community open space, which will have the dock. If any improvements needed for the dock will occur. There is no proposed landscaping on this plan, but we do project to have some sort of landscaping for the formal landscape design. And as you may or may not know, I'm also president of the Native Plant Society, so I'll focus mostly on native plants for these spaces. For the street trees, you'll see them there on alternately spaced on either side of the street. Again, hopefully to use native trees, my intent. Something like willow oak or a cultivar red maple or possibly pin oak, since pin oaks do have more of a taproot and won't interfere with sidewalks as much. For the flowering trees, I may use, again, redberry or serviceberry. For evergreen trees, potentially white pine, hollies, or red cedar. There also is included on that bottom part of the plan is a trip diagram. that's required for entrances onto roads. And just in comparison, the original use was manufacturing, which would have, if it was to continue as manufacturing, would provide 211 trips on the Pilot Town Road entrance. Going down to residential, it goes down to less than 100 trips. So you're also saving on potential traffic for the use. I think that may be all that I have. If you have any questions.
May I ask a quick question? Between lots 6 and 7, is that a path? Or is that just delineating the,
The light green,
right, off the cul-de-sac down to the strip of the
yeah,
purple top trees?
the light green at the very tip of the cul-de-sac that comes down, that is part of the open space.
So it's a path.
So it could be a path. I don't have it designated as like a mulch or anything right now. It's just designated as lawn, but it could potentially be like a mulch path or something like that. The darker green on the side, that's the
Existing
trees, yeah.
Okay.
And there's also a light gray along the side there of that property line,
Mhm.
that goes all the way up to the road. That's the low wall that's between it and the cemetery.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The planting strip you show between the curb and the sidewalk, can you tell us what the width of that is?
I knew you were going to ask that.
You know me.
And I was looking for that on my plan. I didn't see it there. The sidewalk is 5 feet. So I believe that strip is 7 feet,
Okay,
plus or minus 7 feet wide.
shouldn't be any less than that.
Right.
The other question is, what's the condition of the shoreline? Is there any intention to modify it or improve it or any way, or is it in good condition? I don't know.
We had our survey crew, part of our survey crew do some research into the wetland line, the high water line, everything.
Yeah.
And I think there's some invasive species along there. We don't have any way right now. I'm not way, but we don't have any intention right now to improve it per se, but I don't think it's degraded that much. But we can research that as we go along and see if it needs some improvements, like for a living shoreline or something
I
like
mean, I
that.
don't know whether it's eroding or whether it's stable.
I think it's pretty stable, according to our surveyors that are out there, but
Okay.
we can do more research on that as the plans go forward in the engineering process.
Because the plan also shows the stormwater coming from the new neighborhood, crossing the street and being,
Mhm.
kind of have an outfall down there somewhere. I guess that's not been designed yet.
Not yet, no.
Okay.
On the satellite view that I'm looking at, and I haven't been out there personally looked this closely. It looks like there's in the area behind, right along where that open space strip is, there's a perhaps a hedge or hedgerow there right now. Is that part of the university property or?
On the rear, yes. Can we go back to the aerial slide? I think it's the second. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
That dark green strip toward the
yeah.
bottom
along two
left of
sides.
the goal. Yes, that's a evergreen hedge that's existing right now. It's on the University of Delaware
Okay.
property.
Made in
Yes.
Cypress, isn't it?
I don't think it's in cypress. I think it might be arborvitae.
Okay. So I also see a few, there's not too many trees here, but there's one in the
Can we go back to the front first
in the
slide?
corner, right near that open space strip. Existing tree, but it looks like it might,
The one on by the canal,
I'm sorry.
by the canal, on the canal side? Because there is an existing tree like right on the property on the canal side, on
Yeah,
the top
canal
left.
side,
And
that's
there's
gonna be
also
one.
a small tree kind of near the wall
Mhm.
on lot 3.
Yeah. Well, it looks like there's two trees in that bottom corner on this chart, the bottom left-hand corner, there's. looks
Oh,
like
I think
there's
there
two
is an
existing-
existing one down there, yes.
Okay.
Mhm. And that's incorporated into the
Incorporated
rendering
in,
there.
Okay. I don't know do you know what kind of trees they are?
No, I have not checked that yet.
Okay, and then the one on the other side of Pilot Town Road next to the canal, and is that gonna be
That's on the adjacent property,
Oh, did you? Okay,
but the canopy overhangs into
okay,
this property.
okay. Well, if you're gonna keep them, we've had issues recently to this effect, and I guess you know about standard procedures for protecting trees with a silt fence.
Not the drip
Closer
line.
than the
Mhm.
drip line and yada. Yeah, I would expect that would be carried out.
Okay.
The other thing that I'm concerned about is marking the boundaries of the open areas clearly so that you can mitigate the encroachment issues. And I've seen encroachment quite a bit from neighboring lots. So I like to see at least signs or something. There's surveyor marks in the ground, but nobody sees them. They're in the
Mhm.
ground by the time you get there, covered over by sod and whatnot. So I would like to see at least stakes with signs or something. There's prettier ways you could do it with obelisks and things, but stake with a sign is pretty basic.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions or comments for Eric?
Will there be fences around the properties? Will they allow fences, the HOA? Or do you envision this as being open and kind of green and?
We haven't.
Could you step up to the microphone and just state your name and
Cam
address?
Lewis. My name's Cam Lewis, one of the owners, representing mostly family members. My sister Meredith is here as well. We haven't gotten far enough to figure out if we did do fences, it would likely be, from the front elevation rear, for like a fenced backyard, something like that. But I don't think we would likely, when we have our guidelines, we would kind of dictate what kind of fences can go in and be consistent to that effect. But we haven't gotten that far. So,
Thank you.
and then one of your question about the shoreline, we would likely improve the dock. We're going through some of those. We haven't gotten to the application phase, but we're exploring that. And
Take your walk.
with that, it's probably longer than this process, but we'll likely shore up the shore. That's what's required. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would just, pay attention to that stormwater outfall. You know this.
Right.
So we don't create erosion problems, which you can see if you go up and down the canal.
Yeah, our engineers are already working on those calculations on trying to get the right pipe to go under and then having the non-erosive outlet structure, what that's going to entail.
Okay.
Anything else? So is there a motion to accept these plans as
Presented.
presented?
I move we accept the plans as presented.
Is there any further discussion?
I would offer an amendment to that saying that our recommendation to mayor and city council should include that the developer would mark the edges of the open areas to avoid encroachment. For instance, by using signs, something visible.
Okay.
And also that any existing trees that will remain will be protected by a silt fence placed not closer than the drip line prior to beginning construction.
And then also the outfall.
And Eric, I know you know this, but we've had issues with builders and construction people don't always know this, so we have to write it down.
Okay. So, and Kay, did you have something
Well, I
else?
was just, because Rodney was saying, design the outfall so as not to create erosion, pollution issues.
Okay. So as I understand it, the motion is to accept the plans as presented with the amendment, with the recommendation to the developer to mark the boundaries of the open space to prevent encroachment, the protection of existing trees with the silt fence and the
Design the outfall.
just one, Janelle, Can you come up?
So the stormwater management is beyond the control of the city. So if you're going to place that, I would make it an encouragement,
Okay,
can't tell
something
them
to
to do it.
strive, because if it does move forward,
you can't.
the city
right,
has no authority under that
Right.
one. So unfortunately, I like the idea. I just can't enforce that.
Okay.
So the city
So
can't.
encourage the stormwater outfall to be
Designed to not create
erosion.
erosion issues.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Okay, so we had a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Eric.
you.
And that brings us to item E2, which is presentation, discussion, and possible action on the new landscaping plan for the Margaret H. Rollins Community Center. And we have a PowerPoint presentation.
And there it is.
And I am turning this over to Christine and Candace.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. So we didn't know that Eric was going to make a cameo appearance, and I mentioned to him that we were planning to mention his name, and by golly, there he is. So thank you, Eric, for the assistance that you've provided to us. And one of the things I'd like to mention, we can go to the next slide, please. We're not going to discuss this vision plan that you see here. The reason we bring it up to you is there you go. It is too much. But the reason we bring it up at all is because many of our colleagues on the Parks and Recreation Commission were not here in 2019 when Eric assisted Christine and I in pulling together a baseline for the vision between the Stango Park and Stango Park extended parcels of land. And I'd just like to highlight a couple of things that we focused on when we were working on this. We wanted to have a landscape design across all parklands to show a correlation among all the parts. We wanted to emphasize the management of adjacent open spaces. We wanted to be sure that we coordinated with the Lewis Junction Railroad and Bridge Association art project that didn't have that name at that time, but we knew that the railroad tracks were remaining. We also wanted to acknowledge that there was a Del Dot right of way that separates the two parks. At the time that we were pulling this together, there was a Lewis and Bloom Garden for All Ages plan that Eric had been instrumental and involved in. And we wanted our plan at that time to be compatible with that. The Garden for All Ages is kind of off the table at this point, but there's a new plan. The library is putting a pavilion behind the library structure. So we want to be sure that that's incorporated in whatever we do. In our library vision, in terms of all of the Stango Park and library parcels, we wanted to be sure to coordinate with Lewis and Bloom. We have the Children's Learning Garden represented in this diagram that you can see there. And we wanted to be sure that the city managed spaces between the library property and private landowners were acknowledged. We also have incorporated in our vision plans for inclusion of temporary and permanent art exhibits. We've identified locations in the two parks where those where artwork might be displayed. And then last but not least, we had a surprise. Oh, we're going to have restrooms on the Margaret H. Rollins Center. And so as you all are aware with your parks, things change along the way. And we knew that when we worked with Eric on this vision plan in 2019, that there would be change in the offing. But we wanted to have some structure to how we proceeded over the years with changes that we might make relative to trees and plantings, and then the art features that might come into play. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Christine. Oh, I'll stick with this. One more slide, please. Next slide. One more slide.
Yep.
So the photograph that you see here, thank you to Christine's husband for taking this beautiful photograph, was showing you what it looks like today. The removal of shrubs on the left side of this image. So where you see the building corner, those were taken out to get access to the water and sewer lines. And as a consequence, that disrupted the lines of all of the plantings in front of it. We also know from the last couple of years that the lighting situation there has deteriorated, as has the irrigation system in front of that building. And last, for my part, the crepe myrtle in front of the building is substantially overgrown and virtually touching the roof line of this building. And so with that, if you could go to the next chart, and I hand it off to Christine.
Yes, yes. So as Candace had mentioned, the crepe myrtle, after much debate, has been determined to be removed because of the encroachment next to the building. It's also a little bit of a messy sidewalk tree sometimes. So anyway, we just decided it would be best to start from scratch. So this particular rendering shows the elevation at the top of the screen, and at the bottom of the screen, you see it in plan. We're recommending, obviously, replacing all of the existing plantings with a series of vertical deciduous tree elements framing the windows. And underneath of the windows and all along the foundation, we're recommending a low-growing evergreen shrub. And in front of those evergreen shrubs along the very front sidewalk, we're recommending annual planting. So it'll allow for more room for annuals in that bed. Right now, there's not really that much room for annual plantings. And then on the right-hand side of the building, you'll see underneath the signage, we're continuing with the evergreen shrub element, and then suggesting that the existing hydrangea that are there right now be removed. And we're considering replanting them underneath the flagpole. We're not sure, if they'll take the transplant or not, but if so, we were going to put them around the base of the flagpole. And then lastly, to the right-hand side corner of the building underneath the flagpole, we are suggesting a pyramidal evergreen, and that'll soften that corner and kind of balance out all the vertical elements in the building. As Candace had mentioned, the irrigation system's been disrupted, what's left of it. And we're suggesting putting in drip line irrigation instead, which will be a better irrigation system for the annual plantings in the bed on both sides. And the other element would be a very simple lighting package. We're recommending just uplighting behind the the deciduous tree elements, sort of as a wall washer in the back. We've discussed walkway lighting, decided against it. The building in the front, the building is not really used that much at night. And in addition to that, it's another maintenance issue. We had some maintenance issues with the bollards and other areas of the park, so we felt that wasn't needed. There is existing floodlights for the signage on the building, which will stay. They're operative, and of course the flagpole uplighting is operative, so that will stay. The plan also, as we mentioned, suggests removal of all the plant material, including the liriope. There's a lot of liriope in that bed, particularly on the right-hand side. There's a planting bed right now, looks beautiful with all the tulips in it. We're suggesting removing the liriope and replacing, we're going to give the liriope to Lewis and Bloom.
No, thank you.
I'm going to take it over to the warehouse. It's up for grabs. There's a lot of it. So anyway, we're going to remove the liriope in that bed. And we'll be replacing the liriope basically with an evergreen ground cover, which is a carex instead of the liriope, just for something a little bit different. And I think that is pretty much everything for that particular slide. If you could go to the next slide, please. We'll discuss our garden elements, plant material that we're recommending. It's a pyramidal European hornbeam, and 6 of those planted across the front of the building. As indicated, the cultivar is Columnaris nana, which stays fairly compact. And it does take shearing, so it's even though it is a tree, it's a columnar tree, and I think it'll handle this 5-foot space inside the bed. We're also recommending spreading English yew, which will basically be the foundation, evergreen foundation plantings, and underneath the windows as well, so it won't grow too tall and cover up the windows. And on the right-hand side, we're suggesting Cohini holly, and several cultivars are available. Might depend on what's available. San Jose is one that stays fairly small. There's a couple others as well. Again, it might depend on availability right now with the landscape nursery industry, like everything else right now is about, what's available and what's not. This inkberry that's indicated actually corresponds with the planting bed that we'll be discussing next, but it's actually indicated in this plan. And lastly, the variegated Japanese sedge is under ground cover, primarily planted underneath the deciduous trees. And that takes care of the garden elements for the plan. And basically, in summary, plan's very simple, basic, straightforward design. We were wanting to make it something low maintenance, but also allow for annual planting, seasonal color, and just add to the attractiveness of the front of the building. And that's it.
Okay.
Back to Candace for our next slide.
Next slide,
Yes, we
please.
have
Thank
more.
you. So the community center entrance, this is what it looks like today. And as we were coming in during the rainstorm, you saw that we had an exciting water feature there. It's going to take a bit of work making sure that that downspout doesn't overcome and saturate that area. So there's a plan in place for that to be fixed. But like we said, the new restroom was a bit of a surprise, but a welcome surprise because there was one needed for this area. That small planting bed is not well drained, and so we will deal with that. And if you can go to the next slide, please.
Yeah, we have our future view of the community center entrance and what we're calling the bathtub. So we decided to go with some rain garden plant material, materials that handle both wet and dry conditions. And we're recommending an evergreen screen. If we go back to the previous slide, please, you'll see that the generator is pretty predominant in the photo. So we're recommending Ilex evergreen, Ilex glabra inkberry to screen and soften that a little bit. And also we're suggesting a screen for the trash cans to the right-hand side of the door, and another Ilex glabra that'll tie that bed in all together. And I'd also like to mention very briefly, the bike rack has been relocated. I think we've decided to put it behind the restroom.
Yes,
Right
it
here.
will be behind is from this picture. If you go to the left, so you're walking down the side of the building, the entrance to the restrooms from the parking lot is back there, and there's enough space to get the bike rack in there. So
Yeah.
that's where that will go.
Yeah, so the bike rack's been moved around a lot, but anyway, it might be its final resting place. Can you go back to the next slide, please? And our planting plan shows just some tough, old-fashioned native plants and just some Joe Pye weed, short cultivar of Rudbeckia, room for annuals, and some carex that will tie in with the beds in the front of the building. And something I forgot to mention was that at both locations, we would like to introduce the idea of having temporary art in these beds. And I forgot to mention that in the previous slide, the annual bed. If we were to have temporary public art, we would just plant the annuals around it for that season. If you had any questions about that, we could go back to that slide, but we wanted to indicate opportunities for public art in our park. And we're trying, with this plan, we're also trying to address the drainage issues. We might have to do some site preparation, actually dig out the existing soil, put in some sufficient drainage, and then probably redirect some of the gutter system that's there, because the gutter right now is draining off of a huge portion of this roof line into that bed. And if you go out and walk out there tonight, you'll see what we mean. It's a big puddle already created in that area that needs to be directed out of that bed. And again, the plan, addresses, proper selection of evergreens, perennials, and annuals in a very simple and low maintenance design. And that's it that I have.
The next
Back
chart-
to
the next
Candace.
chart, I think, is your-
Next slide, please.
So there's your
Yeah,
garden.
our garden
elements.
elements.
But you mentioned those. I think.
Sorry. Yeah, the inkberry, some Joe Pye weed, dwarf black-eyed Susan, and variegated Japanese sedge for our garden elements. It's a fairly small bed, so we really don't have much planting in the bed right now. And then to our next slide, please, and back to Candace.
So we're looking at the project cycle and with any project. So you can see budget. So our understanding is that this budget is contained within the construction budget left over from when the restrooms were created. So it's not part of our Stango Park extended budget. Once we get approval for that, we'll have a contract with Patrick to assist us with the renovations of the beds and the lighting system, et cetera, plant installation, and then maintenance. And last chart, please. We needed to make some changes. We acknowledged that when the restroom construction occurred, it disrupted a lot of the plantings. The symmetry in the front of the building was no longer there. And so we needed to do something pretty major so that the attractiveness of that building would not be degraded by all of the removal of the more mature plants that had been in the front of the building. And we're delighted that we're going to be able to do that. So next chart, any questions?
I have a question. How wide is the planting bed along the front of the building?
It's 5 feet.
5 feet deep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the horn beam will be planted, 2.5 feet on center.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, and as you say, it takes shearing very
it'll
well.
take shearing. Mhm.
The evergreen shrub is the Taxus piccata repandens, which is a fabulous taxus. My favorite.
Mhm.
The thing is, it wants to stay open and feathery and reach out, and people tend to shear it into a ball.
Mhm.
Don't let them do it.
Okay,
Okay.
I will not.
It is the most graceful plant
Mhm. We
when it's
like it-
allowed to grow.
Yeah,
the way
it's supposed to
wants
grow.
yes.
Soften the sidewalk, you've got that hard edge there. and-
But look at the picture and you can see the structure of it, how open it is. It's not a yew meant to be sheared.
They can get pretty big too.
And they do get big. At
Yeah.
the University of Delaware, they were 15 feet across. but
Yeah,
they
I
were
wondered
30
if 5
years
feet
old.
is big enough. to-
Right.
It does get big.
Yeah, unless there's a
If it's happy.
small variety you
There
can find.
might be a cultivar. that
There's
would
a
stay smaller.
Japanese cultivar, which is smaller and still open. Can't think of the name of it. So you might look for that.
It's not the Harringtonia Taxis.
That's not
I know that, that's not a true taxus, and it likes to stay very prostrate, and looks like it's been stepped on. So I think, I would look into maybe some of the Japanese weeping
Okay.
use first and see what you can find.
Yeah, well, we can talk to Patrick about that. He might be able to
And-
find a source.
And that Ilex coniana is going to want to get big. It'll get 15 feet across unless you plan on shearing them. It's a gorgeous tree.
The San Jose,
No, the coniana.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, if we go with San Jose, the cultivar of San Jose, which I didn't indicate because I wasn't sure what we'd be able to get.
Yeah, well,
But that one's, gets 4 to 6 feet wide.
yeah. And I think any plant like that I think it's a good choice to put something like that here. You might just go see what you can find.
And we want to try and keep a smaller cultivar there, and the 3 that I suggested were San Jose, Jade, and Ruby. And
Okay.
it might depend on availability.
Yes.
And we want to try and stay with something that won't get any wider than 6 feet.
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion for a holly?
Could you
Yeah.
please come up to the microphone and just state your name and your address, please? Thank you.
I'm Bill Edelman, 5 Flamingo Court. Centennial is a great plant. It probably may get 5 to 6 feet wide. And also Dragon Lady, if you can get a nice specimen, very well. Plus, all these hollies can be maintained if
Right.
it's done right. And even with I agree with Rodney, the weeping yews are fantastic. And the beauty is when they start to go. You can go in there and hand prune them.
Right.
And you got to do it not when it's too late. Somebody's got to stay on. Same with the hollies. They could be maintained. You just can't have quote unquote the professionals around here do it.
No, they like to make little balls out of everything.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Bill and I went to school together. Long time.
Really? Wow.
Studied horticulture.
Are there any other questions? or
I'll
comments?
just make a couple comments. One is I really appreciate that you're putting some perennials in there that'll make our pollinators happy and our birds happy, like the Rudbeckia and the Little Joe Pye weed. And I know the butterflies love the Joe Pye weed in my backyard. I would caution about things that might need a lot of attention. My personal experience with inkberry is that they want to be really big and you have to prune them a lot all summer to keep them looking nice. So if there's a small variety you could find. that'd be great.
Shamrock is actually a
Shamrock.
cultivar.
Okay.
Densa might be another one.
Can I ask
Yes.
one more thing about the iris flower?
Yeah.
That's another thing that needs to be pruned properly. If you look at the landscape
They
and
do the
they
ball,
shear, you got this much green on the top and all. this
Nothing on the
sticks
bottom.
below.
Right.
So they gotta be pruned down below and keep them full. I don't think they're the ideal thing for screening that. I think there's other things that may be a little bit better, but they can be if they're taken care of.
Right. Do you have any suggestions?
A lot of the hollies too are fine, but Rodney may have some suggestions.
My own personal concern is anything that takes a really expert hand to keep it looking nice without just shearing it with the head shears. Over the years, I don't know about being sure it's going to be taken care of that way. That's why
Yeah.
I tend to go towards cultivars that will remain smaller and not need a lot of, personal
Eric
attention.
has a suggestion.
Just a couple. For the record, Eric Wall again.
Thank you.
Is this the north facing side, the front? I think the yew you're thinking of might be dwarf golden Japanese yew,
Not the golden one, though.
not the golden one, okay.
Yeah.
Because that one takes shade better than other ones. The color is better for that one. And I think it only gets 3 feet tall and 5 feet wide. I just looked it up on my phone. And then another inkberry there is, it's called Nordic inkberry. And I think that one's more compact and it stays fuller to the base. At least that's what they say. So, but
No, the straight species gets kind of leggy. again, we were trying to, address an evergreen plant that would take both wet and dry. Of course, the hollies will do that. But a lot of the hollies would get too big. Wanted to maybe stick with the natives if we could. That wasn't a criteria, but
I suspect you're going to have to really amend the soil, if not replace it entirely.
yeah, we will.
I would just count on that because construction running over back and forth and back and forth, it's not soil anymore.
Yeah, I think it has to be completely dug out from what we
Yeah.
have seen so far.
And another evergreen that's not native, but does exceptionally well in shaded areas too, and has to take a pruning though, because it can get out of hand, is the English cherry laurel, Prunus.
Okay.
That
The
one,
Ottos? The Otto Lucans?
yeah.
Okay.
And there's other ones too now, like Chestnut Hill, and there's another one, and I can't think of the name right now, but I think it's called Mount Vernon, actually. But they can take more shade, and they have beautiful evergreen leaves.
Right.
And they get the white flowers too in spring, but they do need, some of them are more compact than others, but they do need to be kept at bay because they can get kind of out of hand too. But it's a great foundation plant.
Yeah, I've used them. I like them.
The only other thing I would add is that when you go to plant all these Carexes and Rebecca's and Eupatoriums, don't underplant them. Go ahead and put them in mass. They grow about 15 inches on center. A lot of them, I mean, that's the size. So you want to plant them so they touch, so they're not polka dots in a mulch bed, so that they close and form a solid mass, because that really helps you with the maintenance, keep the weeds down, and it gives you a much better effect. And it's an inexpensive way to get started on the right foot. So.
Yeah, I think we were going to use gallon size, but again, that's something that we'll be discussing with Patrick, but that's a good suggestion.
There's a native sedge too, like Pennsylvania sedge or oak sedge.
A lot of Carexes. Like over 100. But the Pennsylvania can take shade too.
Well, they grow naturally under oak trees.
Right.
So they should be able to take some shade.
Yeah. 'Cause in the front, they're suggesting we plant them primarily under the deciduous trees, the European hornbeam. So, and they'll take that dry shade. Just wanted to try something besides variety.
Thank you. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for
So-
your suggestions.
Yeah. So I think just moving forward, it's just making sure that we can get the species and we'll work on the other issues.
I'll look into that Japanese yew. Patrick might be familiar with it as well.
Okay. So that brings us to the end of our agenda for tonight. It is 7:42. Before, just one question. Well, we can do, that was, never mind, we don't have to do that. It is 7:42. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to ask if there's anybody opposed.
Probably don't need to do that.
No. So,
Well, good, you got lots of good feedback. Good feedback.